So, my name is Tracey Jessup, and I'm Chief Transformation Officer at Montfort University.
hmm Um, can you explain what's your career? I mean, your life experiences related to your career as a woman?
Sure. So, my role now is
hmm
quite a broad one. So, it encompasses people, process, and technology. Here at De Montfort, the IT and media services team, the marketing communications team, which has a lot of the more what I would call the more digital aspects in its team. So it has all the social media that De Montfort does, and also the internet. And the people and organizational design team. So the team that is our HR team and cares about our learning and development and our culture, they all report to me. Sorry, cough.
hmm It's fine.
Um, So I have a broad role, which is all about ensuring that we have a digital transformation that enables us to deliver our empowering university strategy, where we've got goals around empowering our students, empowering our staff, and empowering being part of and empowering the wider community and our alumni. I joined De Montfort in June 2022, so quite recently. And immediately before that, I was Chief Digital and Information Officer at the UK Parliament. And I've had a 22-year career in central government. So when I graduated from university, I joined something called the Fast Stream, which is the graduate program of government. And I did various roles and different things there. And possibly unusually, um, I didn't move into digital right at the start, or IT, it would have been then. I worked in policy roles, different policy roles, working with politicians, working on issues. I did some work with NATO at one point and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, lots of different policy areas. And then about 14 years into my time in government, I made a move from a policy role into the senior team of Parliament's IT service. And the reason that I did that was because for the few years before, Parliament had undertaken probably the first sort of modernisation work that it had done, something called print to web, which was about turning all of the paper that Parliament produces, and it produces more paper every night than the Times newspaper does, and putting that on the web and reducing the cost of what we were printing and doing. And at the same time, we improved the accessibility of it. So that was like my introduction into how digital can help solve business problems and make people's lives better. And I really enjoyed that. So I made a move and I did some qualifications. I did some studying, basic qualifications around business analysis, around information management principles, cybersecurity. And also, I went to Cranfield University, and the government sponsored me to do a digital leadership course at Cranfield. And then, really, my career blossomed from there.
Okay, so I can see that you have a very broad career. So, what did inspire you to pursue and also to continue? Because I think it's very broad.
So I'm always really interested in how the things that I do and I work on are making a contribution and making things better. That's something that I really enjoy. And in terms of my career, I've taken a few moves that people perhaps would say were sideways or, unusual steps because they would give me the opportunity to both broaden my skills, but also work on something different and interesting that will actually improve things. So that's what interests me. And that's why I've probably had quite a broad career because I've been interested in what the roles are, whether I feel I can contribute and learn something from them, but also, what contribution they make.
Okay. Okay. So, would you say that all this path that you follow has been influenced in some way um, by you being a woman, let's say, in regards of lack of opportunities or more opportunities, the roles that were expected from you, and these kind of things?
Well, it is definitely true that in senior roles in IT and digital, and in fact, in all roles in IT and digital, women are in the minority. So I
Hmm.
think the statistic in the UK is something like IT and digital roles as a whole is about 38% women. And when you get up to senior levels, it's a lot less than that, a lot less. So, in terms of the career that I have had, I think some of what I bring is that being a woman and having the experience that I have, I think differently to a number of other IT leaders. So it can be it can be the case that people want to recruit in their own image, but also it can be the case that they're looking to actually broaden and widen their thinking. And that's what I can offer. I'm not necessarily going to have the same experience as a male colleague or the same background, but I can offer those broader, wider perspectives and skills. Something that's been really important to me is making sure that women have as much opportunity as possible to be in the IT and digital sphere. It shouldn't be a male dominated profession. You don't need to be a man to work in IT or digital. But sometimes people are put off because they don't have role models or they can't see their way in. So I both have talked at events to talk about my career path so people can see how I've got to where I've got. And when I was in Parliament, we worked really hard to take male biased language out of all of our job adverts. And things like that. So, for instance, in modern digital adverts, you often see things like people talking about Jedi skills and some really off putting language. And we made sure we took all of that out and put it into gender neutral language. And we also looked really carefully at where we advertised to make sure we were reaching the whole of the market. So not just advertising in traditional IT spaces, but advertising more widely, like on the Mumsnet jobs board, advertising our roles.
So, in regards to that, how important would you say that is to have role models?
I think can be really important and inspiring. Yeah, absolutely. If I look at somebody like Martha Lane Fox, who is a member of the House of Lords, and I knew quite well when I was there, Baroness Lane Fox, who set up lastminute.com, etc., etc. She's a huge role model for me. She's a really successful woman in technology. She hasn't let that hold her back, and she's really challenged stereotypes, and she spends the time to help other women. She gave me great advice, and I think that's really good.
Okay, so going back to the previous question, do you have any anecdote or experience that would you say that it's just particularly women who experience that?
Well, this might not be what you expect, but an unexpected benefit, perhaps, of women being in a minority in our industry is you can go to some of the big IT conferences, and it's one of the few places where there won't be huge queues for the female toilets. Because if you go normally to like theatres or concerts, men are going in and out of the toilets, and the women are in this gigantic queue because the number of men that are often at IT conferences that's not quite the same. But anyway, that's a side benefit that I'd be pleased to see go away. I think. I think um, it can be hard if people make assumptions about what you'd be interested, career development opportunities you'd like, that type of thing,
Hmm.
because you're a woman, and sometimes people do that.
Um, well, I had a question that I was planning to ask later, but I think that it's interesting to tackle now. Why you think that, despite the stats show that in education and countries like the UK, US, Spain, we could say developed countries, despite that the fact that we are seeing that there's more women succeeding in education and universities, what you think is that we don't see that many women in STEM?
I think it's a really good point. And it's probably a combination of change takes time It actually can take quite a long time to engender real large scale change. And also, um, there's a lot of work to be done probably, probably starting at a really, really, really young age with school children to be
Hmm.
clear that STEM careers are something for everybody and being interested in STEM is something for everybody. Because to your point, it isn't just about having role models that's a woman who's, in a really leading job. If you're 7, that's not going to be potentially that relevant to you. You want to understand day to day, you want your teachers to be really clear with you day to day that being interested in STEM is something for everyone. It's not a boy thing or a girl thing.
So, in regards to that, and now that you are talking about the long term, would you say that it has been a huge change from the perspective that society has and the expectation that society has have about women going to STEM?
Well, in some ways, I think it slightly depends what area of STEM you're talking about. Because, I mean, maybe it's my own prejudice, but I think probably society in Britain's general prejudice is that nurses are women.
Hmm.
So it can depend exactly what career path we're talking about, I think, how that feels. And I suppose what I'm saying is we need to all work to say, well, it's not nurses are women or men. It's like anybody could be a nurse. And are you interested in that? Is that what you want to do? Um, I think as well, perhaps something important to mention is that you don't have to, of course, you don't have to decide at a really young age exactly what you're interested in and then stick with that path. Things might change over time, and it's never too late to think about developing new skills or going into new areas. I've got two friends actually who in their 30s retrained to be doctors, having done arts degrees. One was a journalist and she had to retake A levels. She had to do STEM A levels in order to be able to go and be a doctor. And she's a qualified doctor now. Maybe she realized later than might have been ideal that that was what she wanted to do, but she enjoyed being a journalist, but she then decided that she wanted to be a doctor. So it's sort of never too late as well. And I myself, at university, I did English language and literature. That is not a STEM subject. But in later life, as I explained, I undertook certifications and I went to Cranfield and I learned and skilled myself in STEM subjects.
Okay, so you mentioned, for example, this thing that there's not that many, for example, nurse males, for example. So, what would you think that will encourage more people to, let's say now, more women going to STEM subjects, but also more men not just going for more STEM subjects, but other subjects that not typically male subjects?
Yeah, I think there's something about myth blowing, isn't there? Because we all have our view of what what some of those things are. And we need to, it's back to that role model point. There actually probably are lots of nurses that are men,
Yeah.
but not as many as there are nurses that are women. So it's really important to role model out and to be really clear that nursing is something for, as I say, for everybody, if that is what you're interested in pursuing. And I guess probably in a De Montfort context, dance is another discipline where there are more women than men on the dance courses, but there are men too. So we need to be really clear about that, don't we? In our advertising of that and our reflection of that, if we only showed women, we'd be doing a disservice. Or if we only showed men in our computer science degrees labs, in our, when we have open days and things. So I think it's probably being quite aware of that and making sure that the full diversity that we actually have here in the university is visible.
Hmm. So, have you always had the same thoughts about this, or it's something that has been changing through all your career?
I think as you become more senior in IT and digital, you realize how few women there are in the room. if
Hmm.
that makes sense. It's less visible if you're
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
in more entry level roles. So I probably did become more aware of it over time and realized that it was important for me to um, be that advocate and be that role model.
Okay, so well, I think that this will be my last question, but it's up to you. Do you have any last words or something that you want to talk about related to all of this, but I didn't ask you about?
So I think probably the only other thing that I would say um, is that it's really, really important to be able to talk about these things. Sort of not
Hmm.
something that you didn't ask me, but just to have this conversation and for you to have conversations with people. That's really important because that raises awareness, doesn't it? And so that's a really, really good thing. And things like Ada Lovelace Day were obviously created in order to raise awareness. International Women's Day is another example. Wouldn't it be lovely if we didn't have to do that? If things were so equal between men and women that we didn't have to do that, but they're not. So it's actually really important for you and me and others to shine a light and raise awareness on those things. So thank you for the opportunity.